Did you know a major housing bill just became federal law, and it could put real money back in the pockets of older Americans? I'm not talking about some minor regulatory tweak that only touches a handful of people in one county somewhere. This bill cleared the Senate 85-5. Then the House passed it 358-32. Go ahead and try to find another piece of legislation from recent years that earned that level of bipartisan agreement. You won't find one. This was a significant moment. And yet the news cycle gave it maybe 2 days of coverage, buried it under a pile of legal language, and moved on to the next headline. Which means the people who actually need this information, older homeowners, renters on fixed incomes, folks hoping to downsize, families hoping their kids might someday afford a home, never really got the message. I'm not a financial expert, but on this channel, every week, I cover the real financial information that affects seniors directly. The rules that changed, the protections you may already qualify for, and the steps that actually make a difference. This is the kind of content I share every week, and if that's useful to you, I'd love for you to stick around. Now let's dig in. That's what today's video is for. I went through the actual legislation, pulled out what matters most for older adults, and I'm walking you through it in plain language. 5 real wins, what each one means for your life, what to do about it, and yes, a few places where this law still falls short. Stay with me, because by the end you'll understand what you may qualify for and what to consider doing this week. The reason lawmakers focused on housing at all is that the country is short somewhere between 4 and 7 million homes, depending on the estimate you look at. That gap has been a major driver behind rising home prices and climbing rents for years. Plenty of seniors end up stuck either way, stuck in a house that's become too large and too costly to maintain, or stuck in a rental owned by a large investment firm that feels impossible to reach. This new law, officially called the 21st Century Road to Housing Act, tackles that problem from several directions at once. More housing supply, stronger renter protections, more support for aging in place, and more realistic paths toward downsizing. It isn't perfect. I'll point out exactly where, but it's the broadest housing legislation Congress has passed in decades, and older adults have a real stake in it. Win 1. Help repairing the home you already own. Picture this. You're 76. You've lived in the same house for 3 decades, but the bathroom has become dangerous. No grab bars, a slippery tub, poor lighting. The front steps have no railing. The roof has had a slow leak you've been catching with a bucket for 2 years. And somewhere between $8,000 and $15,000 in repairs stands between you and staying there safely. On a fixed income, that number can feel out of reach. This law funds programs aimed at exactly this. Federally backed assistance for qualifying homeowners, including lower-income seniors, to fix the things that make a home unsafe. Grab bars, entry ramps, wider doorways for a wheelchair or walker, weatherization like insulation and window replacement to lower energy costs, and removal of hazards like mold or lead paint. These aren't cosmetic upgrades. They can be the difference between aging in your own home with dignity and being pushed into a facility before you're ready. I'll be honest with you. Much of this rolls out as pilot programs, meaning the funding and structure exist, but availability will phase in region by region rather than appearing everywhere at once. Here's what you can do now. Contact your local area agency on aging. You can find yours at eldercare.acl.gov or by calling 1-800-677-1116. They track when these programs reach your area. If you're in a rural community, also check your local USDA Rural Development Office, since they already run repair programs that this law builds on. Win 2. More places to actually downsize into. This one resonates with a lot of people. You've got a 4-bedroom house the kids left 15 years ago, and you're ready to stop mowing a lawn you don't need. You want something smaller and cheaper to heat, ideally with some equity left over from the sale. The problem is that when you go looking, there's often nothing smaller in your price range near your doctors and your friends. So you stay in a house that no longer fits your life because there's nowhere practical to move. This law leans heavily into expanding housing types that have historically been underbuilt. Accessory dwelling units, small separate units on an existing lot, sometimes called in-law suites, duplexes, townhomes, manufactured and modular homes, and converting empty commercial buildings into housing. An accessory dwelling unit can work in either direction. Build one and move into the smaller unit while renting out the main house, or stay in the main house and rent out the smaller unit for extra income. Manufactured and modular homes get real attention too, since they carry an outdated stigma but are often significantly cheaper to build and are now easier to finance under updated lending rules. The law also directs HUD to publish zoning best practices for local governments and provides support to help reform restrictive codes, the kind that in many towns make it effectively illegal to build anything besides one large single-family home per lot. None of this changes overnight. Zoning reform and new construction take years to show up as available housing. But if you're considering downsizing in the next 1 to 5 years, start talking with a HUD-approved housing counselor now, free of charge, so you understand what's coming and what it means for your finances. Win 3. Real accountability for renters dealing with large corporate landlords. If you rent and your building was bought by a big investment firm, you know how it goes. Maintenance requests disappear into a call center. New fees show up that weren't in your lease, and there's no actual person to hold accountable, just a portfolio of thousands of units behind a corporate name. This law creates a renter outreach and complaint resource specifically for tenants dealing with large institutional landlords, giving renters a federally recognized channel to report mistreatment. It also works to preserve existing public and rural rental housing rather than letting it fall into disrepair. And it opens the Housing Choice Voucher Program, known as Section 8, to more landlords and property types, meaning more places willing to accept voucher holders. There's even a pilot program for temperature monitoring in federally assisted housing, since extreme heat and cold pose real dangers to older residents. And a documented reading creates accountability when a unit isn't being kept safe. I do want to set realistic expectations here. These stronger protections apply most directly to federally assisted housing, public housing, voucher holders, and HUD-subsidized buildings. If you're renting privately without a federal subsidy attached, your day-to-day protections still come down mostly to your state and local tenant laws, and those vary widely from state to state. If you're dealing with a difficult situation in a private rental right now, your best steps are learning your state's specific tenant rights, keeping a record of every interaction, and reaching out to a local legal aid office or tenant rights organization. Many offer help completely free of charge. Win 4. Limits on large investors buying up homes. You've likely watched this happen over the past several years. Big investment firms buying single-family homes by the thousands, renting them out, and quietly pulling that inventory away from regular buyers. Fewer homes on the market, more competition, and first-time buyers getting outbid by a firm with far greater resources than another family. Here's the actual mechanism. Any company or investment group with direct or indirect control over 350 or more single-family homes is now generally barred from buying additional ones, with a handful of specific exceptions, such as build-to-rent projects and homeownership assistance programs. That restriction takes effect 180 days after enactment, and violators face civil penalties of up to $1 million per violation, or 3 times the purchase price, whichever is greater. I want to be transparent about the limits here, the same way housing advocates have been. 6 months is a long runway for investors who already have the resources to keep buying right up until the deadline. The law doesn't require anyone to sell homes they already own. Existing holdings remain exactly where they are. And because the 350 home threshold applies per entity, there's a real risk that large investors restructure into multiple smaller entities to stay under that line, something regulators and Congress will likely need to revisit. Don't expect prices to drop the day the restriction takes effect. This slows the problem. It doesn't reverse it. But combined with the supply-side changes in Win 2, it's a real, if gradual, shift back toward individual buyers, including whichever family member you're hoping will finally buy a place of their own. Win 5. This is where the numbers actually work in your favor. Here's an issue that rarely gets discussed. Say you want to buy a $95,000 home in a lower-cost part of the country, a completely realistic price in plenty of towns. You can afford it. You've saved for a down payment, but lenders often won't take on a mortgage that small because the fees and interest it generates aren't worth their time. So you get priced out of housing you could genuinely afford, simply because the financing system wasn't built for it. This law directs HUD to pilot a small dollar mortgage program for loans of $100,000 or less, potentially bundled with help for closing costs, appraisals, and down payments. It also funds infrastructure upgrades, accessibility improvements, and preservation efforts for manufactured home communities, which matters since many of these communities have been targeted by developers raising lot rents or closing parks entirely, leaving residents with nowhere to go. And the piece that ties everything together: the law significantly expands funding for HUD-approved housing counseling with an explicit focus on serving older adults. This is the addition that can make every other benefit in this law more useful to you, because a counselor can tell you specifically whether you qualify for the repair pilot, whether downsizing makes financial sense right now, what your rights are as a renter, and whether that small dollar mortgage fits your situation, all for free or close to it. You can find one at HUD.gov or by calling 1-800-569-4287. Write that number down. Let's bring it all together. This law passed with rare, broad bipartisan majorities and now, in effect, delivers a whole home repair pilot to help you age in place safely, more downsizing options through accessory dwelling units, manufactured housing, and zoning reform, stronger protections, and a real complaint channel for renters, meaningful limits on institutional home buying, and a small dollar mortgage pilot backed by expanded free housing counseling. Is it perfect? No. The 180-day delay before investor restrictions take effect is longer than it should be. The entity-based threshold has an obvious loophole, and most of the supply-side benefits will take years to fully materialize. Congress will likely have to revisit and tighten some of this, and I'll keep you updated as that happens. But here's what's certain: the people who benefit are the ones who know this exists and actually act on it. So call 1-800-677-1116 for your local area agency on aging, and call 1-800-569-4287 for a HUD-approved housing counselor. If you found this helpful, consider following this channel for more content like it. Subscribe this channel Benefit Bench for more valuable content.